What time is it? Podcast time. It's a celebration. What time is it? Podcast time. Hi, welcome to the It's Your Effin' Journey podcast. My name is Melissa McQueenie, and I am the host of the It's Your Effin' Journey podcast, as well as a licensed professional counselor and a life coach. And I am so excited about today's episode and to share with you. This is my first two-part interview, and I hope you're going to love it as much as I loved chatting with Juliette Cole. She is an LPC, which is a licensed professional counselor, just like moi. And I met her through a nonprofit job that we worked at together quite a few years ago. But I've gotten to know her through her not just professional job as helping people who are in the adoption space, but also as a foster mom, an adopted mom, and her own history of her own adoption. And she's here to talk all about adoption. As you may know from listening to the podcast before, I was adopted as an infant, and this was a really emotionally charged episode. So, trigger warning for anybody out there who is triggered by adoption or, any of the topics that we discuss, like, DCF and all those things. But I hope that you enjoy it. As I said, it's going to be a two-part series, so look for the second part next Monday. And so glad to have you here. Hope you enjoy it. Hello, Juliette. Welcome to the It's Your Effin' Journey podcast.
Hey, how are you?
Oh my God, I'm so excited to see you here. So, um, tell me about I know we worked together at CRT in therapy, but you're not an LPC, right?
I am an LPC.
Oh, you are an LPC. Okay. Okay. And
Yes.
you, like a side note, were trained or you had Lori Roberts as your teacher in college, right? In your master's
Yes.
program,
Yeah, she was one of my grad school professors.
who is like the
She's
best
absolutely
human.
amazing. I love
Yeah.
her.
I cannot tell you how much I love her, and I love that we have that connection because she's amazing, and obviously so are you too. So we worked together at Community Renewal Team. That was a nonprofit, and you were in the IOP program.
IOP PHP program, and I started there after my internship. So I did my internship with the IOP program,
Oh,
and then
that's
I
right.
yeah.
Okay. So we worked together but separate. Like sometimes we had clients, but we didn't really work in the same place, but I got to know you and your amazing story. Um,
and
so what do you
and
do
I don't know if
now?
you remember, Declan and Genesis were in daycare together.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
At Trinity.
Yep.
Ah, okay. So there's like so many layers of connection here. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we met there first and then CRT? Or
So I don't even know if we even realized. I think it was like I went over to the other office, Asian Family Services office, and like I saw a picture and I was like, wait a minute, is that your son? Like he goes to Trinity, and I was like, oh my god, so does my daughter.
so funny. Small world. That was the best daycare. That was the best place.
Oh, they were so great there. They were amazing.
They were like $1 million, but I was like, I love you so much, it's worth it. Um, okay, so awesome. So now what are you doing? You're in private practice, right?
I am in private practice. I have my own practice for 4 years now, a little almost 4.5 years now. Um, and I work mostly with foster and adoptive youth, um, helping a lot of kiddos that are in foster care that may be transitioning to adoption. That is their plan, um, or have already been adopted. I have work with the parents, work with families, but I have also worked with adults on the other side that have made a plan for their kids to be adopted. So
Oh.
all spaces of the dyad.
So now, okay, so let's back up because you have your own adoption story. So like let's like how did you get to this place?
Um, so my journey starts a very long time ago. Um, And my biological mother had a lot of significant challenges. So I was in, well, back at that time, there, I don't know if there was an actual name for it, but it would have been kinship care now, which is you go with someone that you know, they
Okay.
take care of you. I lived with my aunt for a long time. Then she was in the process of adopting me, and my biological mom decided that that was not her plan anymore, um, and came and disrupted. And then I ended up going back with her, and then at 16, she kicked me out, and I was homeless for a while. And then I went and stayed with a bunch of different people. And then when I was 17, I met my mom. Um, and for the last 24 years, um, she's been in my life. So,
So that
and
is
it
amazing. So at 17 you met her, like was that a foster mom or was that just
um
someone?
no, so again, so I was legally there was never a legal adoption there.
Okay.
Um, so but she was my mentor through DCF. They put you in different programs and stuff like that, and one of the programs was a mentoring program. And I never forget that phone call because it was just so hilarious to me, where she called me and it was like a week and a half before my high school graduation, and she's like, hey, how you doing? She's like, all right, so we got to go get your dress, and we got to go do this, and we got to get ready for this, and we got to, and I'm like, who are you? Like, there was no name, there was no nothing. She just like, I was like, hello. She just like just kept going, and I was like, lady, who are you? Like, you're calling me, telling me that you got to get me a dress for my graduation, and like all this. I don't even know your name. So then like we had conversations or whatever, and we did end up going to get my dress, but
Oh.
so yeah, and then it's been like that, and like not just her, but my sisters and my aunts and my grandma who passed away a few years ago. Um, just the whole family has been
So they just like
very,
welcomed you in and like made you their own.
yeah,
I love that.
yeah.
I love that. So do you have biological siblings?
I do. I have three full biological siblings. They're all older than me. And they were all again my biological mother and my dad, which I reconnected with my dad when I was 16, because he was not allowed to be around us from right around the time that I was about 7, 8 years old, until 16 when I reconnected with him and I reached out to him. Um, and actually, my brother reached out first, which is hilarious because my brother, I'll never forget. I was out walking. I was going to get our dog that was on the clothesline. You know how
Oh
they
yeah,
used to
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
and then they would run the clothesline. So I was going out to go get our dog. Dog's name was Cody. Went out to go get the dog, and I turn around and there's this Marine standing there, and I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Like I don't know who this guy is. Now, mind you, I haven't seen my brother in almost 10 years. And so it's just standing there, and he's like, Juliette, and I was like, I go running inside, and I'm like, there's someone inside. And so he like, and then he ends up coming to the door, and he knocks on the door, and my brother's there, and my older sister's there, um, and then you know, my dad comes around, and like we end up having a conversation, and my other sister Jessica was still living in the house at the time too, um, and then shortly after that, she was kicked out. So yeah, Sally is my biological mother. She had some significant mental health issues, still does, as far as I'm aware of. Um, and I think because of all of that, it did definitely shape who I am and what my journey is and how
Yeah.
I got to being what to doing foster care and doing adoption, for personally and professionally. Because it's a hard challenge, and I think it's going through everything. Eighth grade, my sister was kicked out and I didn't understand it. So
Yeah.
I was, I would like to say I was a very sweet kid. I would like to say I was, but in eighth grade, like I started just getting into fights and like, getting so angry with people. And, I truly apologized to this person, and I was able to like have that conversation later on. But like, I remember getting into such a bad fight, like the person was bleeding all over the place because I was just so angry.
Yeah. I relate to that so much. And there is so much anger. And what made me reach out to you about this was exactly that post that you made that we just talked about that said, how traumatic adoption is. And I know for me, like, not having that be recognized my whole childhood left me with such anger, right? And my parents had me in therapy. I was adopted when I was an infant, but when I started acting up in my adolescence, my parents had me in therapy, and I'll never forget it. Like, the therapist, he's such a piece of shit. But he was sitting in front of us, and he was like doing these like check boxes. He was like, well, she can't be upset because of this. She was adopted as a baby, and she has a great family, so it can't be that. And so, and I didn't know any better, right? Like, I was just like, I'm this angry teenager. And it wasn't until I met a therapist in my 20s that was like, yes, adoption is traumatic at any age, And I was like, oh, I had no idea.
And that's one of the common misconceptions, right? Is that like, oh well, they were adopted from the hospital, like they came from the hospital. It was a planned adoption, where the parents knew each other and made a plan and all this, so they can't have any trauma. You are biologically connected. It's not even just like you say biological. No, you are connected. Like there is an umbilical cord that is connecting you to this person,
Yeah,
and you are feeding life source off this person, and then to not have that person that you have the life source from, yeah, that's traumatic.
yeah, yeah,
That is
sure,
significant.
for sure. So, given your history with adoption, that was something you always knew that you wanted to do too?
When I was 17, I was in an emergency youth shelter. Um, I they weren't very emergency though. Um, I love the program. I love the program, and I'm very grateful for the program. But I was in a youth shelter, and you were only supposed to be there for no longer than 30 days. Me personally, I was there for 4.5 months. Um, and like I know other people that were there for over a year, so not very emergency. Um, and in there, I think that was the point for me where I was really like, this is the space, because I would see how the staff would deal with the kids and how the staff would um, talk with the kids. And some of them were absolutely amazing. I will call them out, Mr. Jim, who I ended up working with later on when I was working in a group. He was one of my staff. I was the clinician, he was the staff. And, and then there was Miss Elaine, and they were absolutely wonderful. Um, and then there was others that were just absolutely terrible. Like I can't even, with them. Um, but just like knowing what these kids were going through that I was living with and I was rooming with and I was a part of their life, and you know that was my thing, where it was like no kid should be sitting in a shelter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
It's,
will say this too. I'm very passionate about it, so you'll probably see me cry like 1,000 times during this episode.
yeah. I've already felt it in me, so it's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. And I know for me there's been different points where I'm like sort of re-triggered by it, and one of those was when I started having my own kids. And, I sort of had like processed my own adoption through that therapist that I met in my 20s. But when I had, I think it must have been Kaylin, right? Like she was the oldest. But when I had her and sort of like could picture the situation that my biological mother went through, because they like hung out with me when I was born, like in the hospital for a couple days. Like there's pictures of me with like my grandparents and all of that. And it wasn't until then, I think, that I realized like sort of the sacrifice that she made in having me and bringing me into this world, and how traumatic that must have been for them too. And sort of that feeling of like that poor little baby that was loved and then left. And I know there's a part of time where I don't know where I was for a couple weeks. So I'm like, where did that little baby go? Like, and then, and then there's also this like gratitude for having had that happen when I was so small and not when I was conscious of it, if that makes sense. Like there's just so many feelings that are wrapped around in it. It's complicated and it's emotional. So tell me about your family now.
So my journey started 14 years ago. Um, my first daughter, and I say first because my oldest, my first daughter is 15. She came 2 weeks before she was one. And that journey was so when getting licensed as a foster home, um, the worker would call my ex-husband and be like, "Oh, you have to do it this way." And then he would call me and be like, "Oh, he said you have to do it this way." And I'm like, "No, you don't." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so then I would call him and he's like, "Oh, well, I just thought maybe you'd want to," because he knew I knew the system,
Yeah.
you know. So then like he would have to then backpedal when he would talk to me, and then again would call my ex-husband and be like, "Oh, you have to do it this way." And I'm like, "No, you don't." And then I'd call him again, and then like he lost our paperwork all the time, and then we had to bring more copies, and then I had him sign for copies because like I would bring copies of information down like 3 times, and I'm like, "No, you're signing for it now." So then they finally transferred us over to the FASA unit, which is the foster care division. And when we were transferred over, I got a phone call from our worker who was absolutely amazing. I love her, Glenda Lee. Um, she called me on like a Tuesday one week, and she's like, "We have this newborn baby, we need emergency placement." And I was like, yes, absolutely." And then I didn't hear from her. And then like 2 days later, she was like, "Oh, they had a family member," and I was like, and so like I was devastated. I was heartbroken.
Oh.
Um, and then the following Tuesday, she called me and she was like, "Hey, I have this almost 1 year old, 11 months, it's in a foster home, needs a permanent pre-adoptive home, plan is adoption, and, what do you think? It's an emergency placement. Let me know." And so then I called my ex-husband and I talked to my boss over in the childcare over at CRT. Um, and they were like, "Yeah, I think you should go for it." But I was already heartbroken from a week before because
Yeah.
it was called and then it was nothing. Um, so I called her back and I said, "Yeah." And then she was like, "Oh, I should probably come out and meet you so I can advocate for you at this meeting." And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So she came out the next day and then she's like, "Okay, so I'll let you know." Then I heard nothing. And I was like, "Oh my God, we're going through this again. Like, this is heartbreaking. I don't know if I can do this." Um, and then I called her, I think, on like Thursday. I think it was like Thursday or maybe it was Friday morning. She was like, "Oh, no, no, the meeting's today." Yeah, it was meeting. It was Friday. She's like, "The meeting's today." I was like, "Okay." She's like, "So we'll know later today, and then you'll be able to find out." And I was like, "Okay." And so all day I waited. It was gut wrenching to wait all this time.
Yeah.
and not know what the hell was going on. Um, so I was driving home, and I even waited at work because I didn't want to drive home and wait because
Yeah.
I wanted to pay attention if I got a phone call. Um, so I didn't leave work until 4 that day. I was out at 3 and I didn't leave until 4. And then I'm driving home and I'm on 84 driving home, and I get off the uh exit, and as I'm getting off, I get a phone call. And I was like, "Oh, here we go." I was like, this isn't going to be good. This isn't going to be good." And she's like, "You were matched." She's like, when do you want us to bring her?" And then now I can't seem too eager, like, drop her off now.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm like, "Oh, when would you want to?"
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, we could do it like Monday or Tuesday or whatever." And I was like, Monday's okay. Like
Yeah.
Monday's fine. Start playing all nonchalant. Monday's okay. Um, and then she was like, "Oh, what time would you?" I was like, whatever works best for you, And you know, 9, 10. And so 9 o'clock comes around, and you know they're supposed to be pulling up that weekend at 9 o'clock on Monday morning and bringing me this beautiful 11-month-old baby girl, and I'm sitting at the window and I'm calling my friend that now lives in Texas, and I'm like, "They're not here yet. They're not here yet. It's 8:50. They're not here yet. They're not here yet." And she's like, "Relax, it's okay." And I'm like, "No, but they're not here. They're not here." Um, and so then I'm like, now it's 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock is 9 o'clock, and they're still not here. They're not bringing her. They're not bringing. They made you change your mind.
Oh.
And she's like, "Relax, relax." And then 9:03 they pull up because I'm looking out the window, like,
Yeah.
So 9:03 they pull up and they bring me this beautiful little girl inside the car seat. And I just see her feet hanging outside the car seat. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But now I can't run to the door either. Even though I'm
Yeah.
standing at the door, I gotta wait. I gotta wait, like I wasn't like
Yeah.
waiting like that. Um, so I let her knock twice, and then I opened up the door. But I'm standing outside with my hand on the door handle. And I opened up the door, and and that was her. That was her journey in. And then Mira came, or no, I'm sorry, before Mira came, we met our oldest, who she's 30. That is actually Jenny's biological sister. Um, she is the oldest of the five of them. As
So
far
the
as I know,
so
there's
the sister of the beautiful little baby that you just got that just came to your house, that's her sister.
yes,
Okay.
yes. There's At this time there was four of them. There was four girls when Jenny came. Um,
How old was she
and
at the time?
Jenny was 2 weeks before she was a year.
Okay, and
That's how
how
old
and how old was the older sister?
she was. 17 when I met her.
Oh, so the
And
same
she
age that
was.
you were when you met your mom.
Yes, yes.
That's like a
And
full circle moment.
it really was, and it's like when thinking about it, and it didn't even start off. I don't think it started off, and I think the same thing when I met my mom. Um, I don't think it started off in the space of like, this is gonna be my mom, and I'm gonna be like that space for her. I don't think that's. I think it was just I was a person for her to connect with.
Yeah.
Um, I was the mom of her sister, and that's who I was. I never tried to step into a role or anything else, but it's been 13 years now, and she's not going anywhere. I'm not going
Does she
anywhere.
call you
Like,
mom?
she will identify me as mom, yeah, and it's and we're very connected, and I absolutely love her, and I love her husband and her son, and yeah, I mean
Oh.
those are my kids, and
Yeah. And who
I
cares
love
about the
it.
title, right? Like it's just you're that loving support for her, just like
That's
your
it.
mom is for you.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
God, I love that. Okay, so she came and then tell me the rest.
And sorry, but she
No,
she
it's
had
me. I'm
called
like, let
me.
me figure everything out.
Well, and so that her journey started because it was I had met the other two, the two sisters that are adopted together, probably about a month after Jenny came, and their mom had said to me, because before I was like, how do you do this? How do you have, because everyone talks about an open relationship. Everyone talks about, open communication. It's like, how do you do that? And my mom was great with it. My biological mom was in the hospital, after having surgery, and my mom was like, you're going to go. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Why? Like I didn't, I still don't, I think there's this piece where there is a push to maintain this open connection and maintain this openness. You have to follow the kid's lead. And in
Yeah.
that moment, I did not want, and I still don't want a physical communication with her. I know who she is. I've heard, I hear about her, and right now she's not doing very well, and she's sick, and I feel bad for her, and I feel bad for the people that you know love and care about her. That's not who she is for me, and that's not who she has been for me for more than half my life.
Yeah.
So how do I feel bad for somebody, or I have empathy for you. I have empathy for you, but I'm not like in the space of like, oh my God, I'm so sad that this is. I'm not. And I
Yeah.
know that that sounds pretty terrible, but
No.
I'm not, because that's not who you are for me.
Yeah.
Yes, you gave birth to me, and I appreciate you and I love you for that. You're not my mom, though.
Yeah.
And that's different.
Yeah.
So, as a human, yes, I feel bad for what you're going through as a human, because it's terrible, But as my mom, no, I don't feel bad for you.
And isn't that like I feel like having had or having my life be touched by adoption, I think gives me the ability to accept people's roles in my life not based upon the title. Like the title is really irrelevant. And I think that's something that I've also given to my kids because like even not even purposely doing it, but just like who is this person to you? And just because they have a title doesn't give them access or it doesn't mean anything. It's not, and I think when I talk to other people, they're always sort of like shocked at at my feelings about that, but like it means nothing to me. Like just because someone has the title of uncle, like I will block you on social media. It has nothing to do with our relationship. How you show up for me defines the relationship, which is also why we know adoption or blood is it has nothing to do with anything. Nothing.
Yep,
It's about
absolutely.
it's about the person and your family can be who you make it. And that's sort of how I live my life now. It very has nothing to do with blood at all.
No. And don't get me wrong, there is a biological connection. And so, I mean, I would say I'm honestly closer to my adopted siblings than I am to my biological siblings. And, if they hear this, they're probably gonna be like, oh my goodness. But you know what? It's the investment in the relationship.
Yeah.
I have been shut out
Oh
by
my
my
God.
biological siblings, way too many times. And it's like, because you're upset by something, and now now I don't make the connection, I don't make the contact. And again, I've been in the space where it's been, oh, you're going to regret that, and you're going to do this, and you should do this, and why am I going to pour into somebody that doesn't want to pour into me?
No.
Well, say they want to pour into me because of who they are and what their title is. You need to show it. You need
Yes.
to show that that's what you want to do, and it can't just come from one side. And I've been, in the space with biological family members, where it's, well, what if I die? I want this connection. Well, then okay, so invest in me.
Yes.
Invest in me.
It's intentional, right? Like you have
Yeah.
to be an intentional member of my life to have a relationship, right? Like It's
Yep.
just so interesting. Like, it's just really interesting to see, how this sort of plays out with people. But like, I totally agree. So okay, so tell me more. Tell me about the others.
So I was telling you about the middle two sisters.
Yes, yes,
Their
yes.
mom, um, she said to me, and this, I don't know why, but this is the model that I use now in practice. Is she said to me, she says, Juliette, this is our very first meeting, and I share this story because her sister right above her, who I absolutely love, and she right now she won't say it, or not that she won't say it, but we've built this relationship now. Um, but the very first time that I met her, she looked at me and she goes, she's like almost 7 years old at this time, and she looked at me, she goes, "So who are you supposed to be?" And I was like, I don't know. I don't know who I'm supposed to be. I don't know. Like very intimidated by this 7-year-old. Um, and I'm like, well, I'm her mommy. Like she's your mommy. She goes, oh, okay, and just walks away. And I was like, oh, thank goodness I passed the test. All right. And then later on, she had met Mira at something, and she goes, and again, this little girl looks at me, and she's probably like 2 years older now, and she looks at me, she goes, so if that's her sister and she's my sister, what is she's to me? And I was like, do I say the right name? What do I say? And then my oldest turns around, she goes, well, she's your sister too. And she goes, oh, okay.
Oh, I love, she just wanted it defined a little bit, right? Like,
Exactly. And that's all it was. Um, but now, like, I mean, they do all these, like, there's no difference, and I think that's more the space of, but what their mom said to me, I said I was going to say this a couple times and I didn't, was, we don't have to be the best of friends, but we have kids together.
yeah.
And I was just like, oh, that makes sense. Like,
It's like co-parenting with an ex, right? Like, you're connected, there's a connection there, and I guess it's up to you on how that looks as long as the kids are first.
that's it. That's it. And so I think that's the model that I've taken from there on out, is how do I have these relationships with all these different people, you know, because we have kids together,
Yeah.
you know. So when Mira is my youngest daughter, and when she came, I'd gotten a phone call from my social worker, Glenda Lee, and she's like, I checked the voicemail, I was at work, checked the voicemail, she goes, so Juliet, give me a call when you get a chance. I gotta talk to you about something because this never happened. Just call me. Just call me. And I'm like, okay. And so I was like, oh my goodness. And so I call her. She doesn't answer. And then I go to my supervisor. I don't know if you remember her, Elizabeth Brady.
That sounds very familiar. I also went to elementary school with Elizabeth Brady too, though, but that does sound familiar.
Oh, well, that's her. That was her married name.
Okay,
But
okay.
she was absolutely amazing. She was my supervisor at the time, over at CRT, and she went on into private practice, and she's like, she was again one of the best supervisors I could have had. Um, and so I talked to her, and she was like, "Okay, so that probably means that you've gotten matched again." She's like, "Where's your phone?" And I'm like in my office. She was like, "Why is it there? Why is it not on you?" And so I like ran back to the office, and so then a few minutes later, she actually ended up calling me. She was like, so there's a process to being matched, and you have to go through this, and then we have to tell you that you got chosen, and then you either say yes or no, and then it goes to a matching process, and all this and everything. She's like, somehow they missed all that, but you were matched with a little 14-month-old little girl, you know, and here's all the information. Do you want to move forward? And I was like, yes, please. Um,
Mhm. Now, at this
so,
point, did you have an idea of like how many kids you wanted to have, or you just were like, whenever an opportunity comes in, I'm gonna help when I feel like I can?
So no, I didn't have an idea at that moment. Um, I knew I wanted more than one, you know. Um, and I knew I and I laugh because that's not the way my life turned out. I knew that when I started this journey, I did not want any medically complex. I did not want any special needs. I did not want any like challenge. I just wanted a normal kiddo, right?
What's
Um,
normal?
right? And so here I am, you know, 14 years later with three special needs kiddos that I would die for, you
Oh,
know, and one of them is significantly medically complex, and it just I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it at all,
yeah.
and I laughed because it was like, my husband and I have talked about doing adoption again, foster care again, and adoption if that's the journey that it takes us. Um, and I'm like, maybe we could look at medical. He's like, oh no, I don't know. It's like if it happens, it happens. You don't know, if, like going into it, you're like, I want a kid that's medically got,
Yeah.
you really think about it, I think that's really scary. That is a really scary thought to have. Um, so yeah. So I ended up meeting Mira um that following Tuesday. So it was a Tuesday that the worker called me. The following Tuesday I had the first meeting about her, and then her foster mom brought her down to the Waterbury DCF office. Um, and I still have a relationship with her. We had Christmas dinner with her,
Oh,
or a Christmas date last year with them, and so I mean, still they came to the kid's birthday party, back in June. So they're really involved, and they're just again, it's we've had kids together, and so um but she came and she brought Mira that Tuesday and just sat on the floor and played with this beautiful little curly brown hair, brown eyes. She had
the
the biggest
biggest eyes, the biggest eyes.
brown eyes. Um and you know that was it. And then I I end up going through a divorce during that process. Um so I was like, I'm not having any more kids. Like when you asked, right? Like how many kids did you want? But at this point I was like, no, I'm not having any more kids. Like I can't. I'm a single mom of two, at this point it came out Genesis was diagnosed with intellectual disability. So there was a lot of challenges, and she was disrupting classrooms, and we're in the hospital and doing 211 calls, and you know they're evaluating her, and just it was so much, and then still trying to manage Mira as well, and Mira had her own challenges, and she ended up with a genetic condition. Not ended up, she had a genetic condition. So there was that, and I was just like, I close my license, close my license, exit out, don't call me no more, and then Mira's worker called me in November of 2015, and she's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Don't call me." She's like, "Just wanted to let you know that their mom is pregnant." And I was like, "Okay, that's great. I wish her well. I hope she can do this. Like, don't call me." You know, that's wonderful news. And you know, it was June. She had JJ in June. Um, and in August, I was at work, and I on oh my goodness, she the DCF worker called me that had Mira, and she left me a voice. First of all, I pulled my phone out because in the middle of a session, I forgot to turn my phone off, which was absolutely terrible. As you know, as a clinician, you never want your phone
The
ringing during a
worst,
session.
right? Yeah.
And so I pulled it out. I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." But as I'm turning off my phone, I see that it's the Waterbury DCF, and I was like, "Oh my God, this cannot be good." Like I know
Yeah.
what this phone call is about. I know what's happening. I know, like I knew it. I knew it. Um, And so I stopped paying attention to the session, like and there was only like 10 minutes left. I just could not pay attention to the session.
Yeah.
Um, and so and then the house phone rang because I worked in a group home. So the house phone rang. Didn't pay much mind to that because that one goes off all the time. You can't stop that phone from going off during a session. Um, and so I listened to my voicemail, and my boss has already left at this point, who was absolutely amazing. I loved him beyond belief. Um, and I checked the voicemail, and then he had sent me an email, and he was like, "Oh, this lady called from Waterbury, DCF," not realizing that it wasn't about one of our kids, in the house, and so um she's like, "I have a beautiful little 1 month old sitting in my office, and he needs somewhere to go. I'm wondering if you can be a placement. It's her brother." And I called her back and she didn't answer. And now I'm like, all right, how long do I wait to call her back? So I waited. I'm talking to the staff that was there. And she's like, how long do you wait? And I was like, I don't know. How long should I wait? What do you mean? Like, so I think it was around like 2:30. I called her back and I'm like, hey, I don't know if you got my message. She's like, no, I didn't get your message. And I was like, oh, yeah, what's happening? Even though I already knew based on
Yeah.
the fact that she has a 1 month old there. I'm like, oh, what's going on? And she's like, oh, this is her brother and he's here and we need somewhere to bring him. And, he came into care. And I'm like, all right, what are we looking at here? Because now I need to mentally prepare myself. Is this a moving towards termination and adoption? Is this reunification? What is the plan? Because it had been 5 years. Mira and JJ are 5 years apart. Um, and so it was, oh no, it's going to be reunification. And then the licensing worker came to the house that night on a Friday, by the way, on a Friday. No daycare set up. But on a Friday, they came to the house to bring me a 1 month old. But when she came, she was like, she's like, oh, so, this will be an adoption. Da, da, da. And I'm like, no, no, they said it was reunification. And she's like, oh, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Like, looking at history, that, and I'm like, no, no, no. Like, they said it. They said it already. And then probably about 5 months in, the worker goes, so let's really talk, you know. And so it didn't end up moving towards adoption, and it's now been 8.5 years, almost. And, you know, the beautiful is, but they just brought me this 8 month old, a 1 month old baby on Friday at 8 o'clock at night. And I laugh and I tell people this story. It's like all about the community, all about your resources that you have around you. Um, and dropped off an 1 month old baby and just like, here you go, and $300. And it was like, get everything you need. I don't know about y'all, but $300 is not enough to get formula and
Diapers
diaper,
and
clothes, and a
with
bed and
somewhere to
children.
sleep. Yeah. Holy shit.
Any of that. But I remember I reached out to everybody that I knew that had a baby recently, and I sent you a message, and I was like,
Oh, I'm
"Hey,
gonna
do you have
cry
any
now.
clothes?" I tell this because it's like someone that didn't know because they were touched by adoption helped. And I remember your dad was like, I will send you diapers for a year.
Yeah, he did. Ah,
And then it was great because just I think when some of the challenges or the struggles that happen in adoption, you know, you do form a community, you do form a relationship and a connection,
yeah.
uh, even if you don't know them,
Yeah.
So your dad that just was like, here's a year's worth of diapers. And just Amazon them to me every month. Just Amazon me diapers. Um, it was so helpful, So to have now a child that was recently diagnosed with intellectual disability, have a child that has, a genetic condition that I don't know anything about it. And then have a 1 month old baby, you know,
And you're
like,
going through a divorce.
well, at this point I had already went, like, the divorce was
Okay.
final.
Okay.
But just single mom now of three, and then JJ ended up with, you know, lots of medical stuff, in and out of the hospital constantly. At least once a month we were in the hospital, because he had fluid in his lungs, and all this, and he didn't close off his airways, so he would aspirate all the time, and he would just, like, he was always sick. Every time we would finally come, and then I'm have to take a time off of work because the daycare won't take him. And again, my boss at the group home was absolutely amazing. Shout out to Digby Barrios. I mean, I absolutely love him. Um, he's still my boss. I don't care. I haven't worked for the group home in 6 years, and he's still my boss. If he asked, he did. It was 2020. He had to go out for some medical stuff, and he was like, "Hey, can you come and just be a temporary boss, an interim director of the group home?" And I'm like, "For you, Digby, absolutely. If anybody else would have asked me, I would have said no, you
Yeah.
know but for him, I was like, absolutely, Digby, when do you need me there by? So running a business and being an interim director over at the group home because he asked, and he was the best boss. He was the best. Like, I can't speak any more highly of him. And I think also his conversations that I could have with him, he really helped me to understand adoption so much better too. Just like the challenges, and challenging those beliefs, and it wasn't even about adoption in and of itself, but it was challenging beliefs,
Yeah.
challenging conversations, and really thinking about things from a completely different perspective. um and then I went through the TAC program, which also helped challenge a lot more, which TAC is out of Yukon Adoption Assistance Program, and they do a program through CASE, which is Center for Adoption Support and Education. I don't get any proceeds from any of this that I'm calling out these people or anything for saying that.
You should.
Uh,
Where's all your kickbacks?
um, but like so UConn Adoption Assistance Program, they do training for adoption competency, and they train clinicians, to be adoption competent and to be aware of these are the challenges that people are going through as adoptees, you know, and CASE does. Not only do they do it for adoptees, but they do it for adoptive parents. They do it for professionals, and the amount of trainings that I've taken between both of them, is just amazing. And it's just, I really do think that it's helped me become a better clinician and a better mom, you
Yeah.
know, to truly
I hope you guys are enjoying this conversation as much as I have enjoyed recording it and setting it all up for you. Just a reminder that if this has spoken to you in any way, or if it's something that you want to share, send it to a friend or take a screenshot and share it in your on your social media. I would appreciate you getting the word out, and I appreciate you being here so much. Don't forget to check out part 2 next week. Thank you so much for being here. Mwah.